fellow romance readers, I'm Amy.
And I'm Sarah, and this is Post-Book Depression. You know that feeling you get when you finish a good book that you didn't want to end?
Have you finished a book and just weren't ready to move on from the story and its beloved characters? You find yourself needing just a little more? This multi-trope romance podcast gives you the opportunity to dig deeper with us into books we love as we discuss all the reasons we can't move on.
Feeling chatty? You can continue the conversation with us on Instagram at Post-Book Depression Podcast or on Facebook in our Post-Book Depression discussion group.
We would be so grateful if you would subscribe to our podcast and take a moment to leave a review.
Are you ready? Let's discuss.
Hey everyone, Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays. I'm Amy.
And I'm Sarah, and today we're going to be discussing a few of our favorites from 2024. It's a yours, mine, and ours.
We have several categories that we have allocated that we're going to talk about. Sarah's going to give her favorite, I'm going to give my favorite, and then we also have a favorite that we both collectively agree is great for that topic. I do want to make just a couple of housekeeping notes at the top of this episode. The first one being that just because we are talking about these books as favorite for 2024 doesn't necessarily mean they came out in 2024. It's just books that we read this year personally. The second thing is we will include all of the titles and the authors in the episode description, which you can find, so you don't need to worry about taking any notes. You can just reference that episode description. Are you ready to dig in, Sarah?
I'm ready. Let's do it.
It's going to be a great chat. Our first category, we're going to kick it off with all the feel-goods, and we're going to start with Best Rom-Com. Sarah, what did you pick for your favorite rom-com for 2024?
Okay, my favorite rom-com, which was also funniest best rom-com,
yes,
was Riley Thorn and the Dead Guy Next Door by Lucy Score. This was more on the lines of the funniest for me. This is the first book in the Riley Thorn series. It's a combination of comedy, supernatural, mystery, and romance. It's all combined and
Love
mixed. Riley is a bit of a hot mess at the moment. She's recently divorced, she's broke, and living with a group of elderly roommates. It is so funny, it's hysterical. Riley will have you in stitches as she comes to terms with her supernatural abilities.
Ooh.
So you toss in a hot detective boyfriend to collaborate on cases with, and you've got a match made in heaven. The story and the series is witty, it's funny, it's delightful. I love it.
I'm intrigued.
It's my top.
I haven't read that. I'm going to have to add that to my list. My choice is, we covered this on the podcast, but it's The One with the Kiss Cam by Cindy Steele. And it's about a young woman who's on this blind date at a basketball game that is not going well. And the kiss cam pairs her with this handsome stranger that's sitting next to her. And of course, they're building a connection. And this is her story of healing. She has a lot of fear and self-worth that she's trying to work through. Now, I don't read a lot of comedies. I tend to veer towards the angst and the drama. So when I find one that can make me laugh, it's always a win for me. And this one definitely did that. It left me with this big dorky grin on my face the whole time I read it, and it was just a delight to read. I think it would make a great palate cleanser, and I know you liked it too because we covered it on the
I loved it. Well, I'm the one that recommended it because I do tend towards the comedy,
yes,
and I'm the one that usually, if there's something funny, I've probably introduced Amy to it. Like,
That's
this
true.
is so funny. You have to read this.
Our collective book that we both agreed was top notch, of course, is Euro Dreams by Kate Stewart. We love Kate's writing. We love her so much. She's like really phenomenal at a dramedy, and this is the perfect dramedy. It's this travel nurse who goes with a surgeon for a 6-week assignment to Europe, and this trip starts with a lot of feisty animosity. Yes. It leads to a very serious connection. And I feel like this dramedy was a delightful mix of humor, drama, spice, and a real good time. Yes. Don't you agree?
I totally agree. Kate Stewart is just phenomenal at the way that she can write the comedy and the drama, like you said. Loved it.
Okay, let's move over to Sarah's favorite, not the stress and the angst. Tell me your angstiest book of 2024.
Okay, the angstiest book that I read is The Blooms That Broke Us by Ashley Dill. In this story, Miranda is desperately trying to keep her son, Casey, and herself safe from an abusive ex when she is reunited with Jack to receive a joint inheritance. Jack recognizes her need for help and will do anything to protect her and her son, Casey. This is a second chance romance full of heartbreak and hope. It was high on the emotional angst for me personally. That's where the angst level is because it's just really emotional.
Okay.
Ashley is a brilliant author. This is definitely one to check out. I loved it.
Okay, that sounds right up my alley. I'm going to cry. Am I going to cry? My heart is stone? Do you think?
You know, with you, I never know. I think you should because I did. I actually cried really hard in that story.
Okay. If I'm looking for a good very sinus cleanse, I need to.
Yes. Okay. And if you don't cry, then that is it. Me and all of our listeners are signing you up for some therapy session to why you will not cry.
That's fair. Well, my selection for angstiest book was I Thought of You by Julie Ann. It's no secret. We love Julie Ann on this podcast. This story, she put out several this year, and this was my favorite of her by this year. When a man receives a grim diagnosis, he runs toward the only person he's ever felt true peace around. This story was angsty in the sense that the reader stuck on the will they, won't they train throughout the whole story. I was on the edge of my seat the entire ride, wondering which direction the story was going to land. And I was here for it. She did a phenomenal job. I gave this one a 5. It was so good. The book that you and I both collectively read together was Older by Jennifer Hartmann. This is an age gap forbidden love story about an abused young woman who meets and has a connection with a man 17 years older than her. And after the connection begins, she learns things about him, which we won't say what because that would be a spoiler, that definitely put him in the forbidden category. I would recommend going into this blind. I think you and I both went into this story blind.
We did go into this blind.
With the 17-year age difference, I know that this story's not going to be for everyone. But as you can imagine, there's a ton of angst throughout the entire book as you're rooting for the two main characters, but also dreading an implosion.
Yes. My recommendation is that if you go in blind, trust us, hold on, keep reading.
Yeah.
Don't give up, keep reading. And that's all I'm going to say.
And it's Jennifer Hartmann.
And she does angst like nobody's business.
Yes, she does.
Because it's just incredible. She's one of our top favorites.
Speaking of top favorites, let's move over to Best Book Boyfriend.
Whew, girl. I had to narrow this down.
It was tough, wasn't it?
It was tough. This was hard for me to narrow down because there were so many, but I landed on Till I Reach You by You-Lorissa Padilla. She's one of my favorite authors, and there are two in this story.
Oh.
It is Heathen and David. Now, Till I Reach You is not a love triangle. It is a heartbreakingly beautiful depiction of finding love after loss. In this story, Anna is grieving the loss of her soulmate, Heathen. This is not a surprise, you know going in. Also, if you've read her first book,
Which we covered on the podcast.
We covered that. So if you've read Till You Came Along, first, you have an idea of what has transpired. In the story, we get to see Anna fall in love twice. You-Lorissa has written one of the most remarkable love stories I've ever read. She knows how to write exceptional book boyfriends. I feel like she did exceptional in the first book.
Yes.
And she does it twice in this book. Oh. So grab the tissues and bump this to the top of your TBR. It's phenomenal.
I love the kind of stories exactly like this scenario where you get to fall in love twice. It's a unique spin on that, and I'm here for it. Yeah. I love it. I have not read this, but I will.
Grab the tissues.
I loved the
If
first
this
one
doesn't make you cry, then there is just no
no
hope.
hope for me. I selected Klein from Here for the Cake by Jennifer Millikin. A young woman's ex is marrying her sister, so she makes a deal with a college friend who's an aspiring writer to be her fake boyfriend in exchange for marketing him for a book deal. The fake dating trope, which I always enjoy because more often than not, one of the main characters has underlying feelings for the other, is always a delight for me to read. I love that trope. And Klein treats the female main character with so much adoration and respect, you just swoon the entire book. And she has some humor in there as well.
I'll have to check it out.
For our joint selection, we picked Soldier from Saving Rain by Kingsley, which is another podcast book that we covered earlier this year. When a young man makes a tragic mistake, he's forced to live with the consequences of his choices, and he gets an opportunity for a fresh start, but he does have to face the past that he left behind to find freedom. Soldier, in my opinion, is such a good man. I love his heart. I love his dedication to life and moving forward. What did you love about Soldier?
All the things that you said, and it was one of those things where you see this remarkable man and tragedy strikes his life, but the way that he is able to move forward and move on. And I just, there's not a whole lot you can say without risking spoiling.
That's true.
So I'm going to leave it at that. He is definitely a top book boyfriend. And if you have not read this, you should definitely pick up this story.
It's a solid story. We did have a runner-up for this one because there's just so many good book boyfriends out there. We also covered this. I mentioned it already, but the one with the kiss cam, Duke from that book by Cindy Steele. Duke is so respectful. You just get this instant connection with him. He's swoon-worthy. He goes out of his way to make the female main character feel comfortable. He's flirty, all the things.
Yes.
We love a book that will bring a really good surprise to us. So let's move on to Best Book Surprise. What book surprised you?
Okay, the book that surprised me the most this year was Firefly Effect by K.K. Allen. The Firefly Man is supposed to be nothing more than a spooky story. When she is young, Evelyn finds a dead body in the Smoky Mountains, and the boy she was with is the one that everyone blames. For 14 years, Evelyn has struggled with the trauma of that night, so when her therapist goes missing, she finds her replacement is the attractive single dad, Dr. Lincoln Reed. It's in her sessions with Dr. Reed that begin to unlock the suppressed memories of that fatal night. The story is full of twists and turns that you won't see coming. I highly recommend. Also, KK Allen is very nice. We got to meet her at Book Bonanza this year, and I was so excited because I had literally just finished her book the week before.
I was actually reading this book when we met her.
Yeah, and I had finished it like the week before. And anyway, she was very lovely, and this book is incredible.
I second that. My selection was the one I've already mentioned, I Thought of You by Julie Ann. So I went into this story blind, and I'm really glad that I did. You know, I mentioned being caught up in the will they, won't they angst of the story, but there are so many twists and surprises that I didn't see coming, and I really found myself just completely immersed in what was going to happen. I devoured the story. I stayed up until 1 a.m. to finish it because I was just on the edge of my seat, and I needed to know. Will they or won't they? Or who and who? Like, who's going to be together? So it's a great read. Check it out if you haven't. The one that we agreed on together was Alone with You by You-Aly Martinez, another podcast book.
Yes.
A woman starting her life over buys a restaurant to renovate and runs into a man from her past who is haunted by his internal demons. This is a second chance romance, and true to Allie's MO, is of course full of shocking twists and turns, fast-paced writing, so many surprises in this book. Sarah, tell us what you thought about it.
You-Aly Martinez is the author that succeeds every single time in surprising me. Every single time. I think I have it, and then I feel foolish because I didn't see it.
Yes.
And I am not kidding. Every single story of hers that I have ever read, she surprises me. She is the queen of surprises. Also, she is also a lovely human being and very funny to meet in person.
Yes,
That's a delight of meeting her as well. I loved this story. Pick it up. Go in. Well, you can't go in blind because we just gave a brief description.
But it was very brief. It was very brief.
Yeah. So just pretend. Just go in blind and read it. It's amazing. You will not be disappointed and you will be surprised.
Yeah. Okay, Sarah, new to us authors.
This was tough for me because I was counting up how many new to me authors I've read this year.
Ooh.
32.
Oh, Sarah, that's impressive.
I know. I was so excited.
I wish I would have counted because that's such a fun number to have because I feel like you and I really try and find authors who aren't mainstream. They're not, in all of the publications and media and all of that. I feel like we do a pretty good job of representing a lot of independent authors here on the podcast. That's really important to us. Wow, that is a great number.
I know.
So who did you pick then?
So I picked Julie Olivia, If It Makes You Happy. This story takes place in the 90s, one of my favorite decades. Great decade to be a child. And when life was slower and you met people in real life to fall in love, Michelle finds herself running her parents' Vermont bed and breakfast, and she's only supposed to be there for a few months. What she is not expecting is to fall for the next door neighbor. The local baker and single dad Cliff did not anticipate a city girl like Michelle to walk into his life. This is a cozy small town romance. It gives you all the feels. I loved it. I devoured it. And it was seriously, she's one of my favorite new authors to me this year.
I love that. She was also a new to me author as well. Because you know how I am, I couldn't narrow it down to one. I tried, but I have a tie. maybe a triple tie.
Okay.
Technically, it's a tie. Sarah Bailey, she wrote Heathen and Honeysuckle. I don't have a description of this book prepared, but it was a real delight to read. It's a surfer kind of vibe, and it has childhood nicknames, Heathen and Honeysuckle, so I'm here for that, nickname alert. And the second one is Jennifer Millikin. I mentioned Here for the Cake already. I've been working through Jennifer's backlist. I'm really enjoying her as an author as well. I did read a lot of Mariana Zapata this year. She's not new to me because technically I read my first Mariana Zapata book back in 2019, but I only read one. And so it's been, that's been several years. And then I've just been working through her backlist this year as well.
She's a great author.
Yeah. She's the queen of slow burn for sure.
Yes, she is.
So good. And then collectively, you and I come up with two.
Yes, we did.
It's hard to narrow down. Hannah Bird, Promise Me This. Both of these were podcast episodes, so if you'd like to know more about those, you can hit up those episodes. And Stacey Williams, Where You Belong.
Yes, and Stacey Williams was one that I really wanted to pick, but we had chose her for both of us, so it was because I loved her writing style, and I could just devour everything that she puts out. Just the way she wrote, the emotions that she, it's so good. Check them out.
Absolutely.
They're great.
Sarah and I branched into a new realm this year, didn't we, friend?
We sure did.
We kind of dipped our toes into the audiobook world. And that was very new for us. We'd always been anti-audiobook before. We finally listened to a couple of duet performance books that really kind of hooked us line and sinker, and we were goners after that. So we spent a lot of the last half of this year listening to audiobooks. So we wanted to add a category this year.
We did.
Best audiobook performance. Sarah, who did you pick?
So I picked The Impossible Imposter by Deanna Raybourn, and it is narrated by Angeli Masters, and I hope I'm saying her name correctly. This story, it's a historical mystery romance. Think Sherlock Holmes as a woman, and she's in love with her Watson. This is actually the 7th book in the Veronica Speedwell series. It is not a standalone, but I highly recommend this series. I had read all of the hard copies, and then I dove in to the audiobooks. That's why I'm recommending this specific book. It's full of witty banter, mystery, and love. I suggest listening to this in the audiobook if you enjoy audiobooks, because it will definitely enhance this experience. I believe, do not quote me, but I believe in this one book alone, this narrator, she does, I believe it's 14 or 15 accents and voices. And when I say she is phenomenal, it's insane. So if you like historical mystery romance, you should check out the series. It is amazing. Amy is not a historical romance kind of girl, but I am. But also, if you like Sherlock Holmes, she's literally the female Sherlock Holmes.
I find it so impressive when these audiobook narrators they're so talented when they can do all these different dialects and accents and different characters. And I know, there's different styles. There's duet where they each read the male and female, and then there's dual where they read the female chapters and the female, there's differences, multicast, all of that. I personally prefer the duet style, but I've gotten accustomed to the dual narration this year as I've listened to more. My selection is Burn for You by J.T. Geissinger. And this one is an enemies to lovers marriage of convenience about a Creole woman who is this chef of a restaurant in New Orleans that features a wealthy family's bourbon line in her recipes. And this broody son of the bourbon business stops by to try the food and ends up sparring off with the chef, the female main character. And he presents her with a marriage of convenient offer that she can't refuse. And this is performed by Sebastian York and Diana Luke. It's very entertaining with humor throughout. I love the female main character. Her inner dialogue is so comedic and it's great. You'll love it. One of the things you talked about accents, one of the things that I felt like really elevated this audiobook performance for me was Diana's Creole accents. I really feel like it made the story more atmospheric, and I felt like I was in New Orleans and, walking the streets with her and being in this family environment and all these different scenarios simply because of her acting talents. It was incredible. Together, you and I picked Crossroads by Devney Perry. We did cover this on the podcast as well. It's about a young woman who returns to a cattle ranch resort that she frequented with her sick father over the years as she grew up after having purchased it. And the owner's son, who is set to inherit it, doesn't take the news lightly and spars off with his new owner and former childhood love. This one is performed in duet-style narration with Samantha Brentmore, which I love her, and Connor Crace. I hope I'm saying his last name correctly. What did you think about this audio performance?
I loved this. And you and I had a whole conversation about the narrator, Samantha. We had listened to another book earlier in the year, You and I, that she narrates. And her voice is just, I want her to narrate most of the things that I read. I love this story. I felt like Devney Perry did a beautiful job with this story. And to listen to it on audio with these incredible narrators, it really enhances this beautiful life and world that these authors are creating, and these two narrators do a fantastic job with this story. Definitely recommend.
I feel like an audiobook can really enhance a story or can really hurt a story if you have a good or bad narrator. So far, most of the ones I read this year elevated the
I had one, and I quickly shut it down.
I had one that I did.
Because it was a new to me author, and I didn't want the story to be spoiled by me not vibing. So now I make sure to listen to the previews because I was like, download, and then I was like, undownload.
Yeah, I agree with that. Our final category is Best Book of 2024, and this was so hard. At the time that we're recording this, we are into December. I've read 104 books, and so many of these books were just phenomenal. It's really hard to narrow this down. I don't know if you had the same struggle.
I did. I had the same struggle, and we choose our favorite based on a lot of reasons. So I don't know about you. Mine is actually a duplicate.
Okay.
For the one that I've already mentioned before. So I chose The Blooms That Broke Us because that story has stayed with me and the impact that it had on me. And if a story has a profound impact on me emotionally, I can't let it go. The writing was phenomenal. I cannot say enough about Ashley Dill. Her ability to write a story that just pulls at your heartstrings in the way that she did. Now, let me be clear. That was very hard to settle on one because I could say that about numerous authors that we have read this year. But that's where I land. I feel like it's very deserving. She was also a new to me author. And so, that story was my favorite.
I'm very stingy with my fives. You know this. I think in the 100 books I've read, I think I gave maybe 10 books 5. And of those 10, I think 3 of them were rereads because I listened to the audiobook instead of reading it. I'm very stingy with my fives. But this story, I picked Catch the Sun by Jennifer Hartmann. I love Jennifer's writing so much, but this one is about a teenage girl that has to face multiple tragedies while building a friendship with the boy across the street. Now, we've talked frequently on this show about how Jennifer Hartmann is the queen of ripping your heart to shreds and putting it back together. This was an emotional, heartfelt, tragic, and beautiful story. The vibes, the twists and the turns, the playlist. She provides a playlist that was just, I loved it. After reading this book, I just had it on repeat. It really pulls at your heartstrings. And like you, if a book can make me think about it and feel the book long after I finished it, it really elevates it in my mind. And overall, the way this book made me feel and kept me thinking about it long after I finished it is the reason why I picked it as my best book for 2024.
I love that. And that's not surprising because Jennifer Hartmann, everybody, you all know, we love her. We are obsessed with her. And so I think that that's a great option for your best.
Our selection we made together, you've actually already talked about, and it was your new to you author, If It Makes You Happy by Julie Olivia, and you've already given a description of this story. I liked this story because of the 90s vibes. I loved that. It's a perfect read with all the feels. I didn't want it to end. I found myself reading this slower intentionally because I didn't want it to end.
That was the first book. I think I read it over 7 days. And not because I could not finish it, because I wanted to devour it, but because, and guys, do you know how long it's been since I've taken that long to read a book? I mean, but I just could not. And my husband even said to me, he's like, don't you want to read your book? And I'm like, I can't.
I know. I don't want it to
because
end.
I don't want it to end. And he was like, but is it good? And I'm like, it's amazing.
Yeah.
But I don't want it to end. So I'm just going to read a little bit every day. And
Yes.
he was like, okay, way to savor it. I'm like, I am totally savoring this story. It
was
so
a 5-star for me,
It
too.
was just
I
so
loved
good.
it. All the feels, the nostalgia of the 90s was
Oh,
right up my alley. It does take place in the last part of the year, and I think that kind of played into why I've kind of jived with it so much, because it was in the fall when I started reading it. But, just all the warm, happy feelings, and it was a excellent, phenomenal story.
If you want a warm, happy feeling in the fall of 2025, put this at the top of your TBR and start it in like
But it does cover,
September.
Christmas.
It
so
does.
if you're still looking for a final end of the year book,
That is true.
you could squeeze
You could
this
do
one
that.
in.
You could squeeze it in. Yes, definitely. This year you could squeeze it in. You can read it next year. You could read it this year and then reread it next year. It's that good.
You guys, it has been an amazing 2024 with you. We've had the best time talking and discussing books with you, and we just appreciate you coming along this journey with us. We've had a lot of milestones this year. Our 2nd birthday, interviewed Mia Sheridan.
Well, that concludes our end of the year favorites. We hope you enjoyed this episode. If you want to continue the discussion with us, you can hit us up on Instagram at Postbook Depression Podcast or on Facebook at our Postbook Depression discussion group. You can also email us at postbookdepressionpodcast@gmail.com. Again, thank you for joining us this year as we've discussed all of our favorite stories. We hope you will join us next year as we explore new books and authors. Until next time, keep reading.